The courtroom was silent, the kind of silence that weighs on your chest. The judge adjusted his glasses. The lawyers whispered, and in the back row sat a little boy clutching a worn-out backpack. When the bailiff called his mother's name, she stood trembling in handcuffs. Her eyes searched the crowd until they met his. He stood up, voice shaking, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "My mom is innocent, and I'll prove it." The room froze. Even the judge lowered his gavel mid-air. No one knew it then, but what that boy did next would uncover a truth buried deeper than anyone imagined. Stay with me until the end, because what this child revealed in that courtroom turned a trial into a miracle, and justice into something far greater. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now, let's get into it. 10-year-old Marcus Thompson lived in a small house on Maple Street with chipped paint and a garden full of weeds. The house had 2 bedrooms, a kitchen with old appliances, and a living room where the couch had patches sewn over the holes. But it was home, and Marcus loved it because it was where he lived with his mother, Sarah. Sarah worked 2 jobs to keep their little family together. During the day, she cleaned office buildings downtown, scrubbing floors and emptying trash cans while business people in expensive suits walked past without noticing her. At night, she stocked shelves at the grocery store, making sure every can and box was perfectly aligned before the morning customers arrived. Every morning before school, Sarah would wake Marcus up with a gentle shake and a warm smile. "Good morning, sunshine," she would say, even when she had only gotten 3 hours of sleep between jobs. She would make him breakfast, usually toast with peanut butter or cereal with milk that was close to expiring but still good enough. Marcus knew they didn't have much money. He wore hand-me-down clothes from the church donation box and carried his lunch in a brown paper bag, while other kids had colorful lunch boxes with cartoon characters. His shoes had holes in the soles that he covered with duct tape, and his backpack was held together with safety pins. But Marcus never felt poor because his mother made sure he felt rich in love. Every night, no matter how tired she was, Sarah would sit on the edge of his bed and listen to him talk about his day. She would help him with his homework, even when she was exhausted and her eyes were heavy with sleep. "Tell me about school today, baby," she would say, smoothing his hair back from his forehead. Marcus would tell her about his math test or the book his teacher read to the class, or the game he played at recess. Sarah would listen to every word like it was the most important story she had ever heard. Marcus's father had left when Marcus was only 3 years old. He barely remembered the man, just a shadow of someone who used to live in their house, and then, one day, didn't. Sarah never spoke badly about him, but Marcus could see the sadness in her eyes sometimes when she thought he wasn't looking. "We don't need anyone else," Sarah would tell Marcus when he asked about his father. "We have each other, and that's all we need. We're a team, you and me against the world." Sarah was honest to a fault. If a cashier gave her too much change, she would walk back to return it even if they were already in the parking lot. If she found a wallet on the street, she would search for the owner's address and drive across town to return it personally. She taught Marcus that integrity was more valuable than money. "Always tell the truth, Marcus," she would say while tucking him into bed. "Even when it's hard, even when it might get you in trouble. The truth is all we really have in this world. People can take away your possessions, but they can never take away your honesty." Marcus believed every word. His mother was his hero, his protector, his whole world. She worked harder than anyone he knew, sacrificed everything for him, and never complained about how difficult their life was. But then everything changed on a Tuesday morning in October. Marcus was getting ready for school when he heard loud knocking on their front door. Sarah opened it to find 2 police officers standing on their porch, their faces serious and official. "Sarah Thompson," one officer said, holding up a badge. "You're under arrest for embezzlement and theft from Morrison Electronics." Marcus watched from the hallway as the color drained from his mother's face. "There must be some mistake," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't understand. The officer pulled out handcuffs while his partner began reading Sarah her rights. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Mom, Marcus called out, running into the living room. What's happening? Why are they doing this? The officers looked at Marcus with something like pity in their eyes. Son, you need to stay calm. One of them said gently, your mother is being arrested. Is there someone who can take care of you? Sarah's eyes filled with tears as they put the handcuffs on her wrists. Marcus, baby, call Mrs. Rodriguez next door. Tell her what happened. She'll know what to do. But Mom, you didn't do anything wrong, Marcus said, tears streaming down his face. Tell them you didn't do anything wrong. I didn't, sweetheart, Sarah said as they led her toward the door. I promise you I didn't. This is all a big misunderstanding. We'll figure it out. Marcus ran to the window and watched as they put his mother in the back of the police car. She looked so small and scared sitting there in handcuffs. As the car drove away, Marcus felt like his whole world was crumbling around him. Mrs. Rodriguez came over within minutes of his phone call. She was an older woman with graying hair and kind eyes, who had always been friendly to Marcus and his mother. She found Marcus sitting on the couch, staring at the door where his mother had been taken away. Oh, mijo, Mrs. Rodriguez said, pulling Marcus into a warm hug. Everything is going to be okay. But Marcus couldn't stop crying. They took my mom, he sobbed into her shoulder. They said she stole money, but she would never do that. She's the most honest person in the world. I know, baby, Mrs. Rodriguez said softly. I know your mother would never steal anything. This has to be a mistake. Over the next few days, Marcus learned more about what had happened. Sarah worked her day job cleaning offices at Morrison Electronics, a company that made computer parts. Someone had been stealing money from the company for months, taking cash from the petty cash fund and forging checks. The total amount stolen was over $30,000. The company's security cameras had caught someone who looked like Sarah taking money from the office after hours. There were also documents with what appeared to be her signature authorizing fake purchases and expense reports. The evidence seemed overwhelming. Marcus stayed with Mrs. Rodriguez while they tried to figure out what to do. She lived in a small apartment that smelled like cinnamon and old books, and she did her best to make Marcus feel comfortable. But nothing felt right without his mother. Every night, Marcus would lie in the spare bedroom staring at the ceiling, thinking about his mother sitting in jail. Was she scared? Was she cold? Did she think he believed she was guilty? 3 days after her arrest, Mrs. Rodriguez took Marcus to visit Sarah at the county jail. They sat in a room with other families, separated by thick glass windows. Sarah looked tired and thin, wearing an orange jumpsuit that was too big for her small frame. Marcus picked up the phone on his side of the glass, and Sarah picked up hers. Her eyes were red from crying, but she tried to smile when she saw him. "Hi, baby," Sarah said, pressing her hand against the glass. "How are you doing?" "I miss you, Mom," Marcus said, tears already starting to fall. "When are you coming home?" "I don't know, sweetheart." Sarah's voice cracked. "The lawyer they gave me says the trial might not be for months. But Marcus, I need you to know something very important. I didn't take that money. I would never steal from anyone, especially not from the people who gave me a job." "I know, Mom," Marcus said firmly. "I know you didn't do it. The police think they have proof, but someone is lying about me," Sarah continued. "I don't know who or why, but someone wants me to look guilty. I've been thinking and thinking, trying to figure out who would do this to us." Marcus pressed his small hand against the glass, wishing he could touch his mother's hand on the other side. "We'll prove you're innocent, Mom. I'll help you." "Oh, Marcus," Sarah shook her head. "You're just a little boy. This is too big, too complicated. I just need you to be good for Mrs. Rodriguez and keep going to school and don't worry about me." But Marcus could see the fear in his mother's eyes. He could see that she was terrified of going to prison for something she didn't do. And he could see that she didn't believe anyone would fight hard enough to save her. That night, back at Mrs. Rodriguez's apartment, Marcus couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about his mother's words. Someone is lying about me. Someone wants me to look guilty. If that was true, then there had to be evidence somewhere that would prove his mother's innocence. There had to be something the police missed, or something that would show who really stole the money. Marcus sat up in bed and made a decision. He was just a 10-year-old boy, but he was also Sarah Thompson's son. She had taught him to be brave, to stand up for what was right, to never give up when someone you love needs help. If the grown-ups couldn't save his mother, then he would have to do it himself. The next morning, Marcus woke up with a plan forming in his mind. While Mrs. Rodriguez made breakfast in the kitchen, he sat at her small dining table with a notebook and pencil, writing down everything he could remember about his mother's work schedule and the people she worked with. Marcus knew his mother's routines better than anyone. Every weekday, Sarah would leave at 6 in the morning to clean the Morrison Electronics building. She would come home around 2 in the afternoon, exhausted but always with a smile for Marcus when he got home from school. Then she would rest for a few hours before heading to her evening job at the grocery store. But Marcus remembered something important. His mother had mentioned that she wasn't the only person cleaning the Morrison building. There was another woman who worked the night shift, someone Sarah had only met a few times in passing. Her name was Linda, Marcus wrote in his notebook. Mom said Linda seemed nice, but always looked nervous about something. Marcus also remembered his mother talking about Mr. Peterson, the office manager at Morrison Electronics. Sarah had always spoken respectfully about him, but Marcus recalled her mentioning that Mr. Peterson sometimes stayed very late at the office, long after everyone else had gone home. Why would someone stay so late unless they were doing something they shouldn't be doing? Marcus wondered. Mrs. Rodriguez came over with a plate of scrambled eggs and toast. "Mijo, you need to eat something," she said gently. "You've barely touched your food since your mother was arrested." "Mrs. Rodriguez," Marcus said, looking up from his notebook, "can you help me with something? I want to go to my mom's work. I want to see the place where they say she stole the money." Mrs. Rodriguez sat down across from him, her face concerned. "Marcus, honey, I don't think that's a good idea. The police have already investigated everything. There's nothing you could find that they didn't already see." "But what if there is?" Marcus insisted. "What if they missed something? What if someone is lying about my mom and there's proof somewhere?" Mrs. Rodriguez sighed. She could see the determination in Marcus's eyes, the same stubborn streak that his mother had when she believed in something strongly. "The building is probably locked up tight. And even if we could get in, we'd be trespassing. Then can we at least drive by it?" Marcus asked. "Just so I can see where my mom worked. Please, I need to understand what happened." After a long moment, Mrs. Rodriguez nodded. "Okay, but we're just looking from the outside. We're not going to do anything that could get us in trouble." Morrison Electronics was located in a business park on the edge of town, a plain rectangular building with gray siding and small windows. Mrs. Rodriguez parked across the street, and they sat in her old Honda Civic, looking at the building. "That's where Mom worked," Marcus said quietly. "She cleaned those offices every single day. She was proud of her work. She always said the offices looked perfect when she was done." As they watched, Marcus noticed something. Even though it was the middle of the afternoon, there were still several cars in the parking lot. Employees coming and going, delivery trucks making stops. "Mrs. Rodriguez," Marcus said suddenly, "if my mom worked the day shift cleaning and Linda worked the night shift, when exactly was the money stolen?" Mrs. Rodriguez thought for a moment. "According to what I heard on the news, the security cameras caught someone taking money after regular business hours, late at night. But Mom was never there late at night," Marcus said, his voice getting excited. "She always came home at 2 in the afternoon from her cleaning job. She was home with me every evening until she left for the grocery store at 9. Mrs. Rodriguez's eyes widened. "You're right. Your mother was always home in the evenings. I saw her myself many times, helping you with homework or making dinner." Marcus felt his heart racing. This was important. This was proof that his mother couldn't have been the person on those security cameras. But who would believe a 10-year-old boy and an elderly neighbor? Over the next few days, Marcus became obsessed with learning everything he could about his mother's case. He asked Mrs. Rodriguez to take him to the public library, where he used the computers to search for news articles about the theft at Morrison Electronics. Most of the articles said the same thing. Employee caught on camera stealing money over several months. Sarah Thompson, single mother, arrested for embezzlement. The company estimated the total theft at over $30,000. But Marcus found something interesting in one article. It mentioned that the thefts had been going on for 6 months, always on weeknights between 10 and midnight. Marcus grabbed a calendar and started counting backwards. 6 months ago, his mother had been working different hours. She used to work the night shift at the grocery store, which meant she was there from 11 at night until 7 in the morning. She couldn't have been at Morrison Electronics during the times when money was being stolen because she was at her second job. Marcus's hands were shaking as he printed out the article. This was evidence, real evidence that proved his mother was innocent. But he needed to find someone who would listen to him. He thought about his mother's lawyer, the public defender who had been assigned to her case. Mrs. Rodriguez had mentioned that the lawyer seemed overwhelmed and didn't have much time to spend on Sarah's case. Marcus made a decision. He asked Mrs. Rodriguez to take him to the lawyer's office. The law office was in a rundown building downtown, up a flight of creaky stairs. The waiting room smelled like coffee and had magazines that were months old. When they finally got to see Mr. Williams, Sarah's lawyer, he looked tired and distracted. Mr. Williams was a middle-aged man with messy hair and a wrinkled shirt. His desk was covered with papers and case files, and he barely looked up when Marcus and Mrs. Rodriguez entered his office. "I don't have much time," Mr. Williams said, glancing at his watch. "Your mother's case is pretty straightforward. The prosecution has strong evidence. The security footage, the forged signatures, the missing money. I'm going to recommend she take a plea deal." "No," Marcus said firmly, surprising everyone, including himself. "She didn't do it. I can prove it." Mr. Williams finally looked at Marcus properly. "Son, I know this is hard for you, but sometimes adults make mistakes. Your mother got into financial trouble and made some poor choices." "My mom didn't make poor choices," Marcus said, his voice getting louder. "She was working at the grocery store when the money was stolen. She couldn't be in 2 places at once." Mr. Williams sighed like he had heard this kind of thing before. "The security cameras show someone who looks like your mother taking the money." "But it wasn't her," Marcus insisted. He pulled out the printed article from his backpack. "Look at this. The money was stolen between 10 and midnight on weeknights, but my mom was working at Peterson's grocery during those exact hours. She worked there from 11 at night until 7 in the morning." Mr. Williams took the paper and read it, his expression slowly changing. "When did your mother stop working the night shift at the grocery store?" he asked. "About 2 months ago," Mrs. Rodriguez answered. "She switched to day shift cleaning so she could be home with Marcus in the evenings." Mr. Williams was quiet for a long moment, studying the article more carefully. This actually could be significant," he said slowly. "If we can prove your mother was working somewhere else during the times of the thefts, that would be a solid alibi." "Can you get her work records from the grocery store?" Marcus asked hopefully. "I can try," Mr. Williams said, making notes on a legal pad. "But even if we can prove she wasn't there for some of the thefts, the prosecution will say she could have been involved in others." Marcus felt frustrated. Even when he found evidence, the adults found reasons why it might not be enough. But he wasn't going to give up. "There's something else," Marcus said. "My mom told me there was another cleaning person who worked nights at Morrison Electronics, a woman named Linda. What if Linda saw something? What if she knows who really took the money?" Mr. Williams looked at Marcus with something like respect in his eyes for the first time. "That's actually good thinking. I should have investigated other employees more thoroughly. Do you know Linda's last name?" Marcus shook his head. "But maybe someone at Morrison Electronics would know." After they left the lawyer's office, Mrs. Rodriguez drove Marcus home. He felt slightly more hopeful than before, but he also knew that his mother's trial was still weeks away. Every day she spent in jail was another day of his mother being scared and alone. That evening, Marcus called his mother at the jail. The phone calls were limited to 15 minutes, and they cost money that Mrs. Rodriguez was paying for. But Marcus needed to hear his mother's voice. "Hi, baby," Sarah said when she answered. "How was your day?" "Mom, I've been working on your case," Marcus said excitedly. "I found proof that you were working at the grocery store when the money was stolen. And I talked to your lawyer about finding the other cleaning lady named Linda." "Marcus, sweetheart." Sarah's voice was gentle but worried. "I don't want you spending your time on this. You should be playing with friends and doing your homework, not trying to solve grown-up problems." "But I want to help you," Marcus said. "I know you didn't steal that money, and I'm going to prove it." Sarah was quiet for a moment. Marcus could hear other voices in the background, other inmates and guards moving around. "Oh, my brave boy," she finally said, her voice thick with emotion. "I love you so much, but promise me you'll be careful. Don't get yourself in any trouble trying to help me." "I promise, Mom. But I'm not going to stop looking for the truth." After he hung up, Marcus sat in Mrs. Rodriguez's living room, thinking hard about everything he had learned. The security cameras had caught someone stealing money, but it wasn't his mother because she was somewhere else. So who was it? Marcus pulled out his notebook and started making a list of everyone who had access to Morrison Electronics after hours. There was Linda, the night shift cleaner. There was Mr. Peterson, the office manager who stayed late. There were probably security guards and maybe other employees who had keys to the building. One of these people was the real thief, and they were letting his mother take the blame for their crimes. Marcus didn't know how he was going to prove it, but he was determined to find out the truth. The next day at school, Marcus had trouble concentrating on his lessons. While his teacher talked about fractions, Marcus was thinking about security cameras and alibis. While his classmates worked on art projects, Marcus was wondering how he could get more information about the people who worked at Morrison Electronics. During lunch, Marcus sat alone at his usual table in the corner of the cafeteria. Some of the other kids had heard about his mother's arrest, and they whispered about him when they thought he wasn't looking. A few of them had been mean, saying things like his mother was a criminal, but most just avoided him now. Marcus didn't care about the other kids right now. He had more important things to worry about than playground gossip and hurt feelings. After lunch, Marcus walked to the school library. Mrs. Patterson, the librarian, was a kind woman who had always encouraged Marcus to read more challenging books. She noticed him sitting at one of the computers, typing intently. "What are you researching today, Marcus?" she asked, walking over to see if he needed help. "I'm trying to find information about my mom's work," Marcus said carefully. He didn't want to lie, but he also didn't want to explain the whole situation. Mrs. Patterson nodded thoughtfully. "You know, if you need to find information about local businesses or employment records, sometimes the City Hall keeps public documents. They also have business licenses and registration information." Marcus's eyes lit up. "Could I find out who owns Morrison Electronics or who works there?" "Possibly," Mrs. Patterson said. "Public business records often list company officers and registered agents. But Marcus, if this is about something serious, you should probably have an adult help you." "Mrs. Rodriguez is helping me," Marcus said, which was true. "Thank you for the idea about City Hall." That afternoon, Marcus asked Mrs. Rodriguez if they could visit City Hall. She was getting worried about how obsessed Marcus was becoming with his mother's case, but she could see the determination in his eyes, the same determination Sarah had when she worked 2 jobs to provide for her son. City Hall was a large brick building in the center of town, with marble floors and high ceilings. A receptionist directed them to the records department, where a clerk helped Marcus look up information about Morrison Electronics. The business registration showed that Morrison Electronics was owned by Robert Morrison, who also served as the company president. But what caught Marcus's attention was a list of authorized signatories for company checks. Besides Robert Morrison, there were 2 other names, David Peterson and Linda Chen. "Mrs. Rodriguez," Marcus said excitedly, pointing at the paper. "Linda's last name is Chen. And look, Mr. Peterson can sign company checks too. That means he has access to the money. The clerk overhead. Are you doing a school project about local businesses? She asked kindly. Something like that, Mrs. Rodriguez said quickly. We're just learning about how companies work. But Marcus was already thinking ahead. If both Mr. Peterson and Linda Chen had access to company money, then either one of them could be the real thief. He needed to find out more about both of them. Over the next few days, Marcus became like a detective. He asked Mrs. Rodriguez to drive him past Morrison Electronics at different times of day, just to observe who came and went. He started keeping a notebook where he wrote down everything he noticed. On Wednesday evening, they parked across the street from Morrison Electronics around 7 o'clock. Most of the office workers had gone home, but there were still a few cars in the parking lot. Marcus watched as a woman with dark hair and a nervous expression walked quickly from the building to an old blue car. That could be Linda, Marcus whispered to Mrs. Rodriguez. She looks like she's in a hurry. They followed the blue car at a distance, being careful not to get too close. The woman drove to a small apartment complex on the other side of town. Marcus wrote down the address in his notebook. The next evening, they returned to Morrison Electronics. This time, Marcus saw a tall man in an expensive suit, leaving the building around 8:30. The man got into a shiny black car and drove away. That must be Mr. Peterson, Marcus said. Mom always said he stayed late at the office. Marcus was starting to form a theory. The security cameras had caught someone stealing money late at night. His mother worked day shift cleaning, so she was never there during the night thefts. But both Linda Chen and David Peterson had reasons to be in the building after hours. But which one was the real thief? And how could Marcus prove it? That weekend, Mrs. Rodriguez took Marcus to visit his mother again. Sarah looked even thinner than before, and there were dark circles under her eyes. But she smiled when she saw Marcus, trying to hide how scared she was. "Hi, sweetheart," Sarah said through the phone. "How are you doing in school?" "I'm doing okay, Mom," Marcus said. "But I've been thinking a lot about your case. I found out there are other people who could have taken that money." Sarah's expression grew worried. "Marcus, I told you not to get involved in this. It's too dangerous. But Mom, what if I can prove you're innocent? What if I can find evidence that shows who really stole the money?" Sarah pressed her hand against the glass, wishing she could touch her son. "Baby, listen to me. Sometimes bad things happen to good people. Sometimes the truth gets buried and innocent people get punished. I don't want you to get hurt trying to fix something that might not be fixable. But you taught me never to give up," Marcus said, his voice getting stronger. "You taught me to fight for what's right. You taught me that the truth always matters." Tears started falling down Sarah's cheeks. She was so proud of her brave son, but she was also terrified of what might happen to him if he kept investigating her case. "The truth does matter, Marcus," Sarah said softly. "But sometimes it's not enough. Sometimes people don't want to hear the truth because it's easier to blame someone who can't fight back. Then I'll fight back for you," Marcus said firmly. "I'll make them listen." After the visit, Marcus felt more determined than ever. His mother was losing hope, but he wasn't ready to give up. That night, he made a decision that would change everything. Marcus asked Mrs. Rodriguez if he could use her computer to send an email. He had looked up the contact information for Morrison Electronics and found an email address for customer service. He wrote a careful message, pretending to be a student doing a school report about the company. In the email, Marcus asked if he could interview some employees about their jobs. He specifically mentioned that he was interested in learning about security procedures and night shift operations. He gave Mrs. Rodriguez's phone number and asked if someone could call him back. 2 days later, the phone rang. Mrs. Rodriguez answered and then handed the phone to Marcus with a surprised expression. "This is Linda Chen from Morrison Electronics," a woman's voice said. "I got your email about interviewing employees for your school project." Marcus's heart started beating fast. This was Linda, the night shift cleaner, the woman who might know who really stole the money. "Thank you for calling," Marcus said, trying to sound like a normal student. "I'm really interested in learning about security at your company." "Well?" Linda say the phone? "I don't know how'd." her voice sounding nervous even over much I can tell you. Things have been really difficult here lately with all the problems we've had. What kind of problems? Marcus asked, pretending to be curious. Linda was quiet for a moment. There was a theft recently. Someone was stealing money from the company. They arrested one of the day shift cleaners. But Linda's voice dropped to almost a whisper. But between you and me, I don't think she did it. Marcus's heart was pounding so hard, he thought Linda might hear it through the phone. Why don't you think she did it? He asked. Because I saw things, Linda said quietly. Things that didn't make sense. But I was too scared to tell anyone because I thought they might blame me too. What kind of things did you see? Marcus asked, gripping the phone tighter. Linda hesitated. Look, kid, I probably shouldn't be talking about this, but it's been eating at me. That woman they arrested, Sarah Thompson, she was always gone by the time I got to work. I never saw her there at night when the money was supposed to be stolen. Marcus felt excitement rushing through his body. This was it. This was the proof he needed. Did you tell the police that? Marcus asked. No, Linda said, sounding ashamed. I was too scared. But there's something else. Someone else was always there late at night. Someone who had no business being in the building after hours. Who? Marcus asked breathlessly. The office manager, Mr. Peterson. I saw him there lots of nights, way past normal business hours. He would always act surprised to see me, like he wasn't expecting anyone else to be around. Marcus could barely contain his excitement, but he forced himself to stay calm. Did you ever see Mr. Peterson near the office where the money was kept? Linda was quiet for so long that Marcus thought she had hung up. Finally, she spoke again, her voice barely audible. Yes. I saw him coming out of the accounting office one night around 11. He looked nervous and was carrying a small bag. When he saw me, he said he was just checking on some paperwork, but it seemed strange. Marcus knew he had found the key to proving his mother's innocence. Linda Chen had seen David Peterson in the building at night, near the office where money was stolen. She could testify that Sarah was never there during the night shifts. But Marcus also knew that Linda was scared. She had already admitted she was too frightened to tell the police what she saw. How could he convince her to come forward and tell the truth? Mrs. Rodriguez had been listening to Marcus's side of the conversation with growing amazement. When Marcus hung up the phone, she stared at him with wide eyes. Marcus, she said slowly, did that woman just tell you she saw someone else stealing the money? She saw Mr. Peterson acting suspiciously on nights when money was stolen, Marcus said excitedly. And she knows my mom was never there during night shift. This proves Mom is innocent. But Mrs. Rodriguez looked worried. Marcus, if Mr. Peterson really is the thief, and if Linda is afraid to tell the police, then this situation might be more dangerous than we thought. Marcus hadn't considered that possibility. He had been so focused on proving his mother's innocence that he hadn't thought about what might happen if the real thief found out someone was investigating them. What do we do now? Marcus asked. We need to tell your mother's lawyer about this immediately, Mrs. Rodriguez said. And we need to be very careful. If Mr. Peterson realizes someone is onto him, there's no telling what he might do. That evening, Mrs. Rodriguez called Mr. Williams, Sarah's lawyer. She explained what Marcus had discovered and what Linda Chen had told him over the phone. This is significant, Mr. Williams said. If this woman is willing to testify, it could change everything, but we need to approach her carefully. She's obviously scared, and if we push too hard, she might disappear completely. Can you talk to her? Marcus asked when Mrs. Rodriguez put the phone on speaker. I'll try, Mr. Williams said. But Marcus, I have to warn you about something. If Mr. Peterson really is the thief, and if he finds out you've been investigating him, you and Mrs. Rodriguez could be in danger. You need to stop your detective work and let me handle this professionally. But Marcus couldn't just sit back and do nothing while his mother sat in jail for a crime she didn't commit. He had come too far to give up now. The next day at school, Marcus had trouble concentrating on anything except his mother's case. During math class, instead of solving fractions, he was calculating how many days until his mother's trial. During English, instead of reading the assigned story, He was thinking about how to convince Linda Chen to tell the truth in court. At lunch, Marcus sat alone as usual, picking at his peanut butter sandwich. He noticed some kids at the next table whispering and pointing at him. He caught fragments of their conversation. "That's the kid whose mom stole all that money," one boy said. "My dad says she's definitely going to prison," a girl added. Marcus felt his face getting hot with anger and embarrassment. He wanted to stand up and tell them all that his mother was innocent, that he had found proof, that they were wrong, but he knew they wouldn't believe him. Adults barely listened to him, so why would other kids? Instead, Marcus finished his lunch in silence and spent the rest of the lunch period in the library, reading about the legal system and criminal trials. He learned about evidence and witnesses and reasonable doubt. He learned that in America, people were supposed to be innocent until proven guilty, but he was beginning to understand that sometimes the system didn't work the way it was supposed to. After school, Marcus walked to Mrs. Rodriguez's apartment feeling discouraged. Even if Linda Chen agreed to testify, even if they could prove his mother wasn't at Morrison Electronics during the thefts, would it be enough? The prosecution had security camera footage that supposedly showed someone who looked like his mother. They had documents with forged signatures. Would one witness be enough to overcome all that evidence? Mrs. Rodriguez was waiting for him with news. Mr. Williams had tried to contact Linda Chen, but when he called Morrison Electronics, he was told that Linda no longer worked there. She had quit suddenly without giving notice. "She's gone," Mrs. Rodriguez said sadly. "The one person who could prove your mother's innocence has disappeared." Marcus felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. They had been so close to finding the truth, and now their key witness had vanished. But Marcus wasn't ready to give up. If Linda Chen was too scared to come forward, then he would have to find another way to prove Mr. Peterson was the real thief. That night, Marcus lay in bed thinking about everything he had learned. Mr. Peterson had access to company money. He was in the building at nights when money was stolen. Linda had seen him acting suspiciously near the accounting office, but none of that was enough without Linda's testimony. Marcus needed something more, something concrete that would prove Mr. Peterson's guilt beyond any doubt. But what could a 10-year-old boy possibly find that trained investigators had missed? Then Marcus remembered something his mother had always told him. Sometimes the answer is right in front of you, but you have to look at it from a different angle. What if the answer really was right in front of everyone, but they were all looking at it wrong? What if there was evidence that would prove Mr. Peterson's guilt, but everyone was so focused on blaming his mother that they hadn't bothered to look for it? Marcus made a decision. Tomorrow, he was going to find a way to get inside Morrison Electronics and look for that evidence himself. The decision Marcus made that night would either save his mother or destroy what little hope they had left. He couldn't wait for adults to solve this problem. Every day his mother spent in jail was another day of her spirit breaking, another day of him going to sleep without her goodnight kiss. The next morning, Marcus woke up before dawn with his plan crystallized in his mind. While Mrs. Rodriguez slept, he quietly gathered everything he would need: his notebook with all the information he had collected, a small flashlight Mrs. Rodriguez kept in her kitchen drawer, and most importantly, the determination that burned in his chest like a fire that wouldn't go out. At breakfast, Marcus tried to act normal, eating his cereal and talking about school. But Mrs. Rodriguez had raised 5 children of her own, and she could sense when something was brewing behind a child's innocent expression. "Mijo, you're being very quiet this morning," she said, studying his face. "Are you feeling okay?" "I'm fine," Marcus said, avoiding her eyes. "Just thinking about the math test I have today." Mrs. Rodriguez nodded, but Marcus could tell she wasn't entirely convinced. After she dropped him off at school, Marcus sat through his morning classes like he was watching a movie in slow motion. His body was there, but his mind was already at Morrison Electronics, planning how he would get inside and what he would look for. During lunch, instead of going to the cafeteria, Marcus slipped out of the school building. He had never skipped school before in his life, But desperate times called for desperate measures. He walked the 2 miles to the business district, his backpack bouncing against his shoulders with each step. Morrison Electronics looked different in the daylight than it had during his evening observations with Mrs. Rodriguez. The parking lot was full of cars, and he could see people moving around inside through the windows. Marcus found a spot behind a dumpster where he could watch the building without being seen. He waited and watched for over an hour, studying the patterns of who came and went. Delivery trucks arrived and left. Employees walked out for lunch breaks. Security guards made their rounds. Marcus was looking for an opportunity, a moment when he could slip inside unnoticed. Around 2 o'clock, Marcus saw his chance. A maintenance truck pulled up to the building, and 2 workers in coveralls got out carrying toolboxes and equipment. They propped open a side door to bring in their supplies, and for several minutes, the entrance was unguarded. Marcus's heart pounded as he ran across the parking lot, trying to look casual but moving as quickly as possible. He slipped through the open door just as one of the maintenance workers was coming back outside. The man barely glanced at Marcus, probably assuming he was someone's child visiting the office. Inside, Morrison Electronics was bigger than Marcus had expected. Long hallways stretched in different directions, lined with offices and conference rooms. The walls were painted beige, and the floors were covered with gray carpet that muffled footsteps. Marcus could hear the sounds of office life all around him. Phones ringing, keyboards clicking, people talking in meeting rooms. Marcus tried to remember everything his mother had told him about the building layout. She had mentioned that the accounting office was on the 2nd floor, near the back of the building. That's where the petty cash fund was kept, and where the forged documents had supposedly been created. Marcus found a stairwell and climbed to the 2nd floor, trying to look like he belonged there. His plan was simple but risky. He needed to find evidence that connected Mr. Peterson to the thefts. Maybe there would be documents that showed Peterson had access to the accounting systems. Maybe there would be security logs that proved he was in the building during the times money was stolen. The 2nd floor was quieter than the 1st, with fewer people moving around. Marcus walked down the hallway, reading the nameplates on office doors. He passed the Human Resources Department, the marketing office, and several conference rooms. At the end of the hall, he found what he was looking for, a door marked Accounting Department. Marcus tried the door handle, but it was locked. He stood there for a moment, feeling frustrated and scared. He had come so far, taken such a big risk, and now he couldn't even get into the room where the evidence might be hidden. Then he heard footsteps coming down the hallway. Marcus panicked and looked around for somewhere to hide. There was a supply closet next to the accounting office, and fortunately, it was unlocked. Marcus slipped inside just as someone rounded the corner. Through the crack under the closet door, Marcus could see a pair of expensive leather shoes stop right in front of the accounting office. He heard the jingle of keys and the sound of a lock turning. The door opened and closed, and then everything was quiet. Marcus waited in the dark supply closet, surrounded by boxes of paper and office supplies, trying to decide what to do next. Whoever had entered the accounting office was probably an employee who had legitimate business there. But what if it was Mr. Peterson? What if Marcus had stumbled upon him in the act of stealing more money? After what felt like hours, but was probably only 10 minutes, Marcus heard the accounting office door open again. The footsteps moved away down the hallway, and then Marcus heard the ding of an elevator. Marcus waited another few minutes to make sure the person was really gone, then carefully opened the supply closet door. The hallway was empty. He tiptoed to the accounting office and tried the door handle, hoping whoever had been there might have forgotten to lock it again. The door opened. Marcus slipped inside the accounting office, his heart beating so loud he was sure everyone in the building could hear it. The room was larger than his classroom at school, with several desks, filing cabinets, and computer workstations. There were charts on the walls showing company profits and expenses, and a large safe in the corner that was currently closed. Marcus didn't know exactly what he was looking for, but he started searching systematically. He opened desk drawers, looking for anything that might connect Mr. Peterson to the missing money. Most of the drawers contained normal office supplies, staplers, pens, paper clips. But in the bottom drawer of one desk, Marcus found something interesting. There was a folder labeled Petty Cash Reconciliation that contained records of money taken from the company fund over the past year. Marcus flipped through the pages, looking at dates and amounts. What he saw made his stomach drop. The records showed that money had been withdrawn from petty cash on dozens of occasions over the past 6 months. But according to the timestamps on the documents, many of these withdrawals had happened during his mother's day shift hours, not during the night when Linda Chen was working. This didn't make sense. If the security cameras had caught someone stealing money at night, why did these records show money being taken during the day? Unless there had been two different thieves, or unless someone had been altering the records to make it look like the thefts happened at different times. Marcus photographed the documents with Mrs. Rodriguez's old digital camera that he had borrowed from her purse that morning. He was so focused on his work that he almost didn't hear the footsteps in the hallway outside. Someone was coming back to the accounting office. Marcus looked around frantically for somewhere to hide, but the office didn't have many options. There was a large desk near the window, and Marcus crawled underneath it just as the door opened. Through the gap between the desk and the floor, Marcus could see another pair of expensive shoes enter the room. These shoes walked directly to one of the filing cabinets and opened it. Marcus heard the sound of papers rustling and file folders being moved around. Then he heard a voice that made his blood run cold. "Where are those transfer records?" the man muttered to himself. "I thought I put them in here." It was Mr. Peterson. Marcus held his breath, trying not to move or make any sound. He was hiding under the desk of the man who had framed his mother for theft. The real criminal was standing just a few feet away from him, looking for something in the files. Marcus heard Mr. Peterson open several more file drawers, apparently searching for specific documents. Then the man made a phone call. "Linda, it's David Peterson," he said into his phone. "I know you quit, but I need to ask you something important. Did you take any files with you when you left? The transfer records from March are missing." Marcus couldn't hear Linda's response, but he could tell from Mr. Peterson's tone that he was getting agitated. "No, I'm not accusing you of anything," Peterson continued. "I'm just trying to locate some paperwork. Look, if you happen to remember seeing any documents about the Morrison account transfers, please call me back. It's urgent." Peterson hung up and continued searching through files. Marcus realized that Peterson was looking for evidence of his own crimes. He was trying to find documents that would prove he had been moving money around illegally. After several more minutes of searching, Peterson slammed a file drawer shut in frustration. "This is impossible," he said to himself. "Those records have to be somewhere." Then Peterson did something that made Marcus's heart nearly stop. He walked over to the desk that Marcus was hiding under and sat down in the chair. Marcus was now trapped beneath Peterson's feet, unable to move or escape. Peterson opened the desk drawers and began searching through them. Marcus could hear papers shuffling directly above his head. He tried to make himself as small as possible, pressing against the back wall of the desk cavity. Then Peterson's phone rang again. "David Peterson," he answered. "Oh, hi, Mr. Morrison. Yes, I'm still looking into the discrepancies we discussed." Marcus realized Peterson was talking to his boss, the owner of the company. This was the man who had been trusted to manage the company's money, and he was stealing from his own employer. "No, sir," Peterson continued. "I haven't found any evidence that the cleaning lady was working with accomplices. It looks like she was acting alone. The forged signatures match her handwriting samples perfectly." Marcus felt sick to his stomach. Peterson was lying about his mother, telling his boss that Sarah had been forging signatures when Peterson knew perfectly well that he was the one who had forged them. "The trial is next week," Peterson said. "With the security footage and the document evidence, the prosecution has a solid case. I don't think there's any chance she'll be acquitted." Marcus wanted to jump out from under the desk and scream at Peterson, to tell him he knew the truth, but he forced himself to stay hidden and keep listening. "What about the missing transfer records?" Mr. Morrison apparently asked. because Peterson's next words made Marcus pay even closer attention. "I'm sure they'll turn up eventually," Peterson said. "Probably just misfiled somewhere. Even if they don't, it won't affect the criminal case. Those records just show internal company transfers that have nothing to do with the petty cash thefts." But Marcus suspected those transfer records had everything to do with the thefts. Peterson was clearly desperate to find them, which meant they probably contained evidence of his guilt. After Peterson finished his phone call, he spent another 10 minutes searching through files. Finally, he gave up and left the office, locking the door behind him. Marcus waited until he was absolutely sure Peterson was gone, then crawled out from under the desk. His legs were cramped and his whole body was shaking from fear and adrenaline, but he had learned something crucial. Peterson was looking for missing transfer records that apparently showed internal company money movements. These records were missing, which suggested that someone had taken them, either to hide evidence or to use as proof of Peterson's crimes. Marcus thought about Linda Chen, who had quit her job suddenly after talking to him about what she had seen. What if Linda hadn't just quit because she was scared? What if she had taken those transfer records with her when she left, planning to use them as evidence if anyone tried to blame her for the thefts? Marcus needed to find Linda Chen. He carefully left the accounting office and made his way back through the building. Getting out was easier than getting in, because he could leave through the main entrance along with other people who were coming and going. Once he was outside, Marcus realized he had a problem. He had skipped school and had no way to get back before Mrs. Rodriguez came to pick him up. He was going to have to tell her what he had done and hope she would understand. Marcus walked to a payphone outside a gas station and called Mrs. Rodriguez collect. "Marcus, where are you?" she said, as soon as she accepted the charges. "The school called and said you weren't in your afternoon classes." "I'm at Morrison Electronics," Marcus said. "I found evidence that proves my mom is innocent." There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. "Marcus Antonio Thompson," Mrs. Rodriguez said, in a voice that meant serious trouble. "You tell me right now what you've been doing." Marcus explained everything. How he had snuck into the building, hidden in the supply closet, overheard Peterson's phone calls, and discovered that Peterson was looking for missing transfer records that might prove his guilt. "Mijo," Mrs. Rodriguez said when he finished, "what you did was incredibly dangerous. If that man had found you hiding in his office, there's no telling what might have happened to you. But Mrs. Rodriguez, I found proof that he's the real thief. And I think Linda Chen took some documents with her when she quit. Documents that might prove everything." Mrs. Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment. Finally, she spoke. "I'm coming to get you right now, and then we're going straight to that lawyer and telling him everything. You heard. But Marcus, you can never do anything like this again. Do you understand me?" "Never." "I understand," Marcus said. "But it was worth it. I know who really stole the money." 30 minutes later, Mrs. Rodriguez picked Marcus up from the gas station. She was clearly upset with him for skipping school and breaking into a building, but she was also amazed by what he had discovered. "You're either the bravest kid I've ever known, or the most foolish," she said as they drove to Mr. Williams's office. "Maybe both." At the law office, Mr. Williams listened to Marcus's story with growing interest. When Marcus finished explaining what he had overheard, the lawyer leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling. "This is remarkable," Mr. Williams said. "If Peterson is looking for missing transfer records, and if those records contain evidence of unauthorized money movements, then we might have found the key to your mother's defense. But we still need to find Linda Chen," Marcus said. "She's the one who saw Peterson in the building at night, and she might have taken those transfer records when she left." Mr. Williams nodded. "I've been trying to locate her, but she seems to have disappeared completely. No forwarding address, no phone number. It's like she vanished into thin air." "What if she's hiding because she's scared of Mr. Peterson?" Marcus suggested. "What if she knows he's dangerous and she's trying to protect herself?" "That's possible," Mr. Williams said. "But how do we find someone who doesn't want to be found?" Marcus thought for a moment. "Mrs. Rodriguez, remember when we followed her car that night? We saw where she lived. Maybe she's still there, just not answering her phone. Mr. Williams looked at Mrs. Rodriguez. You know where this woman lives? We followed her to an apartment complex, Mrs. Rodriguez admitted reluctantly. Marcus wanted to observe the people who worked at his mother's company. Mr. Williams made a note in his legal pad. I'll send an investigator to check that address. If Linda Chen is still there, maybe we can convince her to testify on your mother's behalf. But Marcus was worried about something else. Mr. Peterson knows that Linda might have information about the thefts. If he finds her before we do, he might try to silence her somehow. The lawyer's expression grew serious. You're right to be concerned. If Peterson is willing to frame an innocent woman for his crimes, he might be capable of worse things. That evening, Marcus called his mother at the jail to tell her about what he had discovered. He tried to sound optimistic, but he could hear the defeat in Sarah's voice. Marcus, sweetheart, I'm proud of you for trying to help me, but I don't want you putting yourself in danger. What you did today, sneaking into that building, that was incredibly risky. But Mom, I found evidence. I heard Mr. Peterson lying about you. I know he's the one who stole the money. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Even if that's true, baby, proving it in court is going to be very difficult. Peterson is a respected businessman. I'm just a cleaning lady with no money for a good lawyer. Who do you think people are going to believe? They'll believe the truth, Marcus said firmly. We just have to make sure they hear it. But Marcus could tell his mother was losing hope. The trial was only 5 days away, and they still hadn't found Linda Chen or the missing transfer records that might prove Peterson's guilt. That night, Marcus lay in bed at Mrs. Rodriguez's apartment, staring at the ceiling and thinking about everything that had happened. He had risked everything to find evidence of Peterson's guilt, but would it be enough? Even if they found Linda Chen, even if they got the transfer records, would a jury believe their story over the testimony of a respected businessman? Marcus thought about his mother sitting in that cold jail cell, probably lying awake just like he was, wondering if she would spend the next several years of her life in prison for a crime she didn't commit. He thought about all the other innocent people who might be sitting in jail cells tonight, people who had been failed by a system that was supposed to protect them, people whose families were fighting impossible battles against lawyers and judges and police officers who had already made up their minds. Marcus made another decision that night. He wasn't going to let his mother become another casualty of an unfair system. He was going to find Linda Chen himself, and he was going to convince her to tell the truth in court, even if it meant putting himself in danger again, even if it meant facing Mr. Peterson directly, even if it meant standing up in that courtroom and demanding that people listen to a 10-year-old boy who refused to give up on his mother. Because sometimes, Marcus realized, the smallest voice in the room is the one that speaks the loudest truth, and sometimes a child has to teach adults what justice really means. The next morning, Marcus woke up before dawn with a clarity that surprised him. He had spent the night thinking about Linda Chen and where she might be hiding. If she had taken those transfer records when she left Morrison Electronics, she was probably keeping them somewhere safe, waiting for the right moment to use them. Marcus remembered something from their brief phone conversation. Linda had sounded genuinely upset about his mother being blamed for something she didn't do. That meant Linda had a conscience, even if she was too scared to act on it initially. While Mrs. Rodriguez made breakfast, Marcus sat at her kitchen table with a city phone book, looking up every Chen in the directory. There were dozens of them, but Marcus started calling the numbers one by one, asking if Linda Chen lived there. Most of the calls led nowhere. Wrong numbers, people who had never heard of Linda Chen, or no answer at all. But on his 15th call, an elderly woman's voice answered, "Yes, Linda is my daughter," the woman said carefully. "But she's not taking calls right now. She's been very upset about something at work." Marcus's heart jumped. This could be Linda's mother. He needed to be very careful about what he said next. "My name is Marcus Thompson," he said politely. "My mom used to work with Linda at Morrison Electronics. I was wondering if I could talk to Linda about something important." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Thompson," the woman repeated. Isn't that the name of the woman who was arrested for stealing? Yes, ma'am, Marcus said, his voice getting stronger. But my mom didn't steal anything. I think Linda might know who really took the money. Another pause. Then the woman's voice became warmer, more sympathetic. Oh, you poor child. Linda has been so troubled about this whole situation. She keeps saying the wrong person got arrested, but she's been too frightened to speak up. Marcus felt hope flooding through his chest. Can I please talk to her? It's really important. My mom's trial is in 4 days. Let me see if she'll come to the phone, the woman said. Hold on a minute. Marcus's story proves that sometimes the smallest voices carry the greatest truth. A 10-year-old boy with nothing but love for his mother and determination in his heart exposed corruption that seasoned investigators missed. When Linda Chen finally testified, and those transfer records surfaced, David Peterson's lies crumbled completely. Sarah Thompson walked free that day, but more importantly, Marcus showed us all that justice isn't about age or power. It's about never giving up on the people you love, no matter how impossible the fight seems.